Hello, everybody, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Friday, Feel Good Friday. So I'm going to start with a joke. It's not very funny, but I'm going to try. Knock, knock. Who's there? God. Huh? I've been thinking a lot lately. I don't know. I saw something about a video or a movie or something, and it was about having an interview with God. And in my head, I immediately think in terms of like an interview, like 60 minutes, sitting down, having a serious conversation, or Barbara Walters bringing God to tears because that's what Barbara Walters did. Um, but then really thinking about, you know, I don't think that that's how it would work. If we could sit down and have a conversation with God and just, knock, knock, who's there, and God be at the door, and we could have a sit down, I think that God, but now, mind you, this is my perspective, but I think that God would be like a kick your shoes off, put your feet up, have a cup of coffee, let's chat. What would you ask God if you could? Like, I want, why a snake? Sometimes I feel bad about snakes. I don't like snakes. I'm not going to run out and try to find snakes or have a pet snake. Yeah, not my thing. But like it feels like snakes got a bad rap because the Bible, right? Satan was a snake, and however you want to look at that, whether you take the Bible literally or as a story, might affect how you think about snakes. But it feels like, the snake itself, this interesting little animal, reptile that slithers around on his belly and loses its skin, which seems to me an awful lot like, a prelude to resurrection. You can shed off the old and start with the new. Feels like the snake got a bad rap. So I think I'd want to ask God, why the snake? Like, what's that about? What else would I ask God? I think I would ask God about what breaks God's heart. Not a very happy thing, but like what kinds of things break God's heart. I mean, the big things I can think of would be like, what would break my heart with my stepsons? If somebody hurt them, that would break my heart. It would be horrible. So I think if God is hurt, if it breaks God's heart when we hurt other people or creation, because those are all part of God's speed, like God created them, maybe that breaks God's heart. And when other people hurt us, maybe that breaks God's heart too. I'd also like to ask God, like, what makes you laugh? Like, I don't really think about God as being like that old man up at his big chair in heaven and all that stuff. But there's something about the idea of God having a good belly laugh that really intrigues me. Like, what knock knock joke would make God laugh? None of them that I know, I think. They're all groaners. Are there dad jokes? Like, we think of God as father. Are there dad jokes that are God jokes? I don't know. What about you? Can you come up with a good joke? Not when I say that. Now, I'm not inviting people who are trying to be nasty to come up with all kinds of bad God jokes. I'm just saying, like, are there things that make you chuckle about God in a positive way? I think too often we sort of do this whole hierarchy of God, that God is up there somewhere, and God is so great and mighty that we can't possibly approach God, and let alone sit down and take our slip off our shoes and have a drink with him, or with her, or however God is. I mean, I think I come from a generation that thought of God as he. There is a whole group of young people coming up and sort of thinking of God as she, or as he or she, that kind of thing. So it's something to think about. And for me, he slips out because that's how I grew up. It's not that I'm thinking that God is a trouser wearing gentleman in the sky. It's just the language that I use, and I'm trying to learn differently. But when I'm talking like this, it sometimes just slips out. So that's what the anthropomorphization is when I talk about God. I'm working on that. Got a lot of work to do. But I think it's really important that we acknowledge that for those of us who believe in God and have a relatively good relationship with God, it's important that we acknowledge that God is not sort of that father knows best God, that that mom or whoever's a priest could shake a finger and say, wait till your father gets home, and we know we're going to go up to our room and shake and think, oh my heavens, what have I done? I'm in trouble. I don't think of God that way. I think of God as more like, If God comes home and sits down, and my mom has to sit down and say to God, or my priest has to sit down, my bishop has to sit down and say to God, okay, this is what Rachel did today. Like, I don't know what we're going to do with her. She just keeps breaking the rules and lipping off, and she swears too much and all that. What are we going to do? I don't see God, I can't picture God saying, yeah, so we're going to take her away her allowance and we're going to ground her for a month and where she can't have the car and she's not allowed to use her computer. I think God more saying, like, okay, she's at it again. How can we be patient? How can we help her to not lip off? How can we help her? I think of God as that being the divine being who wants to figure out how to help us be the best that we can be, to be in the best relationships we can be in. Not as someone who's a punishing God, but as someone who is an uplifting God and a fulfilling God who fills us with goodness and helps us to see the best of ourselves. And then other people get to see the best of us as well. So that's sort of my thinking about God. So the idea of sitting down with God and just having a drink, putting up our feet, watching the sunset, you know, I can just sort of imagine sitting. And sometimes I do this when I meditate. God is there. And in my mind, it's like I'm around a fire. Usually it's around a fire because it's cold in the room I'm sitting in when I pray. Um, but, there's God, Creator God, and then there's the Holy Spirit and Jesus. And sometimes Creator God there's an old woman and an old man, and the spirit is an eagle, and the son is a guy. Sometimes his hair is short, sometimes it's long, sometimes he's wearing jeans. I never see his face. He's just a being beside me, out of the corner of my eye. And as I said, sometimes God is both male and female. Yeah, to date, God has never just been female, but there's sort of a both and there going on. But the idea of just sort of sitting there, and I think, if we know somebody who's a really great painter, and we're sitting with them and they're looking at their latest piece of artwork, how incredible is it for us to sit there with a glass of wine or a cup of tea or something and look at them and say, that's a beautiful piece of work. Like, you did an incredible job on that. It's just the colors and the depth and the layering and the way you make the shadows happen. And it's just absolutely breathtaking. Can you imagine sitting with God on your front porch and watching the sunset or the sunrise and be able to say, like, again, God, another unique, beautiful sunrise. How do you come up with these every day? How amazing would that be? Like, that would be a feel good day, wouldn't it? The thing is, I think I think God does invite us to sit down, to answer the door when he goes knock knock, when God goes knock knock. I think that God is waiting for that invitation. I don't think God will ever break down the door. I don't think God will ever force us to let God into our lives. But I think for those of us who have already done it and have experienced how beautiful that can be, and for those people who are sort of sitting like, I'm not sure, my experience of God has been, I challenge you to think, with those of you who think your experience of God has been horrible, take a deep look and say, was it my experience of God that was horrible, or my experience of the people who presented God was horrible? There are lots of priests out there who are absolute pud knockers that do horrible things in the name of God. There are people who have hurt people intentionally in the name of God. Orange Shirt Day, people hurting people intentionally in the name of God. But the fact is, that wasn't God that did those things to you. It is uninformed, mean-spirited, ridiculous people who co-opted God's name and did those things. So for those of us who have a relationship with God where we can say, hey, God, come and sit down and let me talk to you about that beautiful sunset. Awesome. Keep it up. But for those of you who haven't had that experience of God, I do truly pray that one day you will, that you'll be able to feel comfortable and safe enough that when you hear that knock on the door, you can open it just a little bit and see before you a God who is not going to hurt you, who loves you and is going to be as patient and say, you know what, you don't have to come out and I don't have to come in, but we can just talk through the chain on the door for a while. And when you're ready, if you're ready, then I can come in. Or you can come out and we can sit together and watch the sunset. I pray that you will have an experience like that, a moment when you will feel so good about the presence of God that you'll be able to have a truly feel-good Friday or whatever day it might be. Have a great weekend, everybody. God bless you. I will be around on Sunday on the other channel for Gospel on the Go. for Orange Shirt Day, and I'll be back on Monday for Church at Home with Rachel. And I really do apologize for Gospel on the Go because I thought I hit stop when I was recording the video and I didn't. So you got a little extra of me switching gears between recording recording videos, and I apologize about that. But that's like an Easter egg at the very end of the video, so you'd have to hang in there to see it. Have a great weekend. God bless you, and thank you so much for being part of the Church at Home with Rachel community.